Okay, welcome to this meeting of the executive member for Housing and Safer Neighbourhoods in conjunction with myself, the executive member for Finance and Performance, on Monday the 15th of March, 10 a.m. I will start with declarations of interest as the first agenda item. Councillor Crackhill, do you have any declarations of interest? I have no interest to declare either. Item 2 on the agenda is to approve the minutes of the decision session held on the 15th of February. I think that's another one where we were both there, Councillor Crackhill. Are you happy to agree those as a correct record?
Yes, happy to agree those.
Okay, and I will sign those when I get the next opportunity in West offices. Item number 3 on the agenda is public participation. We have no members of the public registered to speak today, so I will go straight to agenda item 4, which is the approval of the Financial Inclusion Grant Scheme Awards 2021-2022. I'll hand over to Pauline Stutchfield to introduce the item.
Thank you, Chair. This is a report that follows a previous approval to undertake the grant scheme for 21-22. We have £100,000 a year base budget funding for the grant scheme, and we had a carry forward of £20,000. So we've been actually able to fund 7 schemes this year compared to 6 schemes last year. And as you can see, they are very much focused on our most vulnerable residents and those that are excluded from sort of normal levels of support. 5 of those schemes we have funded before. The other 2 schemes, which includes the new one from Citizens Advice York, supporting the Travellers Trust, and Experience Counts. Experience Counts we have worked with before, and they've been particularly successful in securing employment and volunteering opportunities for residents in York, and so we look forward to this scheme being successful as well. I guess the important thing is now, given the impacts of COVID, this is even more important as we go forward as part of the skills and employment agenda. The Welfare Benefits Unit in itself is a new scheme, although we have worked with them before. Their particular scheme is very much focused on complex universal credit cases, supporting advice givers in the city, as we're starting to see some really difficult circumstances come through as a result of the pandemic. So you're asked to approve those schemes going forward. In terms of monitoring, you'll receive a report every 6 months on the progress of those schemes, usually in July and December, at which you can see how they're going and also the outputs from those schemes against the service level agreements that we set for them. Thank you.
Okay. Any questions or comments, Councillor Crackhill?
I think just a brief comment, thank you. I'm obviously very happy to support these allocations that Pauline's just set out. I think these organisations and these projects play a crucial role in providing the advice and support that people need, and the help that they need, particularly at this time. To make the most of their money really, and to access welfare benefits, manage their finances. And I'm pleased that these projects do reach out really. Most of them are reaching out to support particular communities, whether it's older people, homeless people, people in insecure accommodation. And I'm particularly pleased with being able to add some of the new schemes that you just mentioned, including those to the traveller community, and the Experience Counts, and also that we can continue to support the very successful scheme that's based in GP surgeries, which has been very effective at reaching hard to reach people sometimes. So yeah, very happy to support all of this.
Thank you. Just a brief comment. I think it's good, as Pauline said, that we're starting to see some new bids coming in. I think one of the things that we've been trying to do is create some level of flexibility with this particular fund that allows us to respond to particular need. And obviously at the moment, that need is very tailored around COVID and COVID support. And I think it's good that we have that flexibility. It's a particularly small amount of money in the grand scheme of things of the council budget, but it's probably one of the most important pots of funding that we have, and the level of support we get. And I think the value for money we get as a council from working with organisations such as Citizens Advice and Welfare Benefits Unit, etc., which is delivering probably 10 to 15 times really what the the financial value is in terms of the social reward we're getting out of that. So I think it's fantastic that we still have these organisations in the city, and really welcome the bids that have come forward. So I think with that one, I'm happy to agree the recommendations as on paragraph 2 on page 3. Are we happy with that, Councillor Craighill? Okay, in which case we'll move to, I noticed a nodding. I'll move to agenda item 5, which is the Council Tax Hardship Fund, and I'll hand over to David Walker to introduce that one.
Good morning, Chair. So this paper is to provide an option to the executive member for finance and performance in consultation with the executive member for neighbourhoods, with an option to provide a further council tax support hardship scheme during 21-22. In terms of background, the government have provided the council with COVID support funding during the 21-22 year. A notional amount of that funding, approximately 1.2 million, is provided to support the council tax support scheme. The way that's worded and the way that's come from government acknowledges that the scheme may be more expensive in itself as a result of potentially increased numbers claiming during 21-22. So it doesn't specifically prescribe how we need to spend that money. So in other words, we could keep the money in totality against the risk that our council tax scheme cost will exceed 1.2 million. But having said that, during the 2021 year, we ran a hardship scheme with government funding where we awarded £150 per person for their council tax to support them with their bills. One of the issues around the 2021 scheme was that the initial government funding of £956,000 didn't actually meet the cost of the scheme. So we actually ended up with costs against the council's budget during 2021 of approximately 60 to 70,000 by the time we get to the 31st of March. The council, along with residents, obviously are challenged with financial issues during 21-22. And whilst the notional funding of 1.2 million would allow a repeat of the scheme, awarding £150 per person, one of the risks we run during 21-22 is that we may get increased numbers of people actually claiming council tax support. I mean, it's something we hope won't happen, but there's no guarantee on what will happen with the local economy and therefore how our numbers of claimants will change. The impact of that obviously is that it undermines the collection fund in terms of the amount of council tax we expect to collect during 21-22. So paragraph 7, just in terms of context, what it sets out there is if we had 1,700 new claimants across 21-22, then the cost to us would be 1.2 million, and that would be the amount of money we'd have lost in our normal council tax collection. So the funding given by central government would support us with that loss. However, we also have to consider that it's unlikely that we'll get a full year with 1,700 new customers, and we certainly hope that won't happen. And at paragraph 8 in table 1, there's information there from February of last year through to January of this year, which shows how the council tax claims have moved. If we look at April, which was the start, really, March, April time of the pandemic, we had approximately 5,000 council tax customers. As of January this year, we've got 5,400. So the number of total customers we've had has increased around 400. But to put some perspective, if you look at September, for example, we did have nearly 1,700 new customers. That was when we had a spike when furlough was coming to an end. So you can see that it can have an effect. So there's an element of prudency around how we manage the amount of government funding that we have. In terms of the options that I've set out within the paper, there's 3 options there. One is we could provide no council tax support at all through the hardship scheme directly to residents. The other 2 options are to provide £50 per council tax support customer or £75 per council tax support customer. It's difficult to predict exactly what will happen during 21-22, but this report recommends that we go for option 1, which is a £75 per council tax customer, which is basically 50% of the government funding, retaining 50% in case we do get a large increase in the number of council tax customers across the year. It's a bit difficult in terms of understanding what every authority is going to do, and we have been trying to find out what local authorities around us are doing. So Hull, for example, have looked to retain their full funding from central government in terms of the risk they run around the council tax support scheme, whereas East Riding have told us they're taking the hybrid approach of retaining an element of that funding and then giving direct support to customers. But those schemes and those decisions are being made at the same time as this one's coming to you as well. So the paper's recommendation at paragraph 2 is that the Executive Member for Finance Performance is asked to approve the preferred option of £75 as set out at paragraph 12. I'm happy to take any questions.
Okay, Councillor Craghill.
Got unmuted this time. Yeah, I don't have any particular questions. I think I follow your arguments there. Hope I do. And I am well, kind of happy to go with option 1. I think it's our best option in the circumstances. I'm glad that we have been able to provide that additional top up of £150 in the past for the previous financial year. I wish we could continue to do that, obviously, ideally, but I do recognise the need to take a prudent approach on this, particularly, you know, in view of the fact that there is so much uncertainty going forward and a significant prospect of even more people claiming council tax support as we move out of lockdown and move forwards. So I think this means that we should have the funds available to help everyone and kind of protect the sort of resilience of our finances. I would of course prefer it if the government could provide more consistent and more realistic levels of support through the benefit system, but in the absence of that, I'm happy to support option 1.
Thank you, Councillor Craghill. I was probably about to start where you left off there. It's another example of the government promising us everything and then not quite delivering on what it was that they promised. So obviously the 1.2 million is welcome, but as with a lot of the schemes that David and his team have had to work with, it's about recognising the shortfalls and what that income is and trying to work the best way of what we can do for our particular residents. I think I would also observe that we do believe, and I have said very often, that council tax is one of the most regressive forms of taxation. And this year particularly, that the government has passed the burden of funding social care onto council tax residents and to some of those who are the least able to fund this. And it is about time that system was reformed and we were given a proper way of funding social care and funding local authorities, so this burden isn't being passed on to some of those who are least able to pay that money. And I think this is a scheme that does do that. It balances that, it uses that money and provides probably not at the level of support, as Councillor Craghill said, that we would like to have been able to give people as we had last year, but does make sure that those people do have some level of protection. And I think probably the most telling point you made there, David, was that spike we saw in September at the time furlough ended, and we all know that similar spike is coming. So I think it's very, very apt that we're looking forward towards that and predicting what is going to happen and having some level of contingency in place to help to support people at that particular time. So I think with those comments, I'm happy to approve the recommendations in paragraph 12 across pages 11 and 12, I think, which is option 1, which is the 75 payment. Are you happy with that one, Councillor Craghill?
I am happy with that, yes, thank you.
Okay, and then it's over to you again, Dave, I think, on agenda item 6, which is the extension of the winter grant scheme.
Thank you, Chair. This is a little bit of a technical paper, really, in terms of what it's trying to do. And the paper is actually recommending that the Executive Member for Finance and Performance, in consultation with the Executive Member for Housing and Safer Neighbourhoods, that we extend our winter grant scheme out to the 16th of April 2021. I think in terms of background, we know that the government awarded the Winter Support Grant Scheme funding back in November 2020, and this was in recognition of the challenges to families around meeting their bills across the winter period. In terms of the funding the council received, we did receive some £416,000 to help protect and provide support to our vulnerable households and specifically families with children. The funding wasn't specifically earmarked around the free school meals area, but what we did agree and approve was that £200,000 of the initial funding was given to children's to support free school meals, which it has done across the Christmas February half-term period, and was initially for the start of the Easter period, where we expected Department for Education to provide funding for free school meals going forward. What then happened, was that on the 22nd of February, the government decided that they would extend out the winter sports scheme for a further 2 weeks to the 16th of April 2021, and provide an additional £59 million of the funding nationally, which is an additional 144,000 to City of York Council. And in doing that, they acknowledged that there was no money being made available for free school meals, certainly for Easter, and it may potentially be for the rest of the 21-22 year. Apart from, just a caveat, that there are some projects and schemes that they will provide funding for, but not all children obviously attend those, so it does leave a gap. So what we were asking to do was that we again top sliced the additional funding to provide another £50,000 to children's, which we think they will need to provide free school meals across the Easter period. The reason this report's come to you is, though, because back in February, which is not that long ago, we did bring a paper to you just in advance of the government's announcement to say that we were running out of funding because we top sliced £200,000 for schools. There wasn't enough funding in the pot to supply support to families out to the 31st of March. And therefore we asked that we access WIFAS funding with a cost of potentially £200,000 to do that to the 31st of March. What's now happened, obviously, with the announcement of funding out to the 16th of April, is that I've had to bring this back because the reality of the situation is we were already spending WIFAS funding, and whilst we top slice the new grant and give money to children's, it still leaves us with inadequate funding to meet the costs out to the 16th of April. So this report really repeats a little bit of what we asked on the 15th, and that's that we extend the scheme out to the 16th of April in line with the government funding, in acknowledgement of the risks, or the financial risks to us of doing that. So table one at paragraph 9 sets out how we got to the £200,000 estimate, and table 2 at paragraph 10 sets out what we think will happen if we extend out to the 16th of April. Now the difference, 200,000 to just short of £205,000, is not huge, but it is potentially £5,000 of additional risk that we run by doing this. But it is difficult to estimate exactly what the things will cost, because at any one point, when we provide information on the spend against the winter sport grant, there are outstanding claims. It's been extremely successful in terms of people coming forward and making claims and supporting families, and we supported over 1,200 individual payments across the city so far. So on the basis of extending out, we're saying that there is a risk that we may go a little bit above the £204,000. The other thing that we're asking within the paper is that, because we don't know what the exact outturn will be, and rather than bringing another paper back, if it rose a little bit above £205,000, any further spend would be in consultation between the Council Section 151 officer and in consultation with the Executive Member for Finance and Performance. In terms of what other authorities are doing, it's very, very different in different authorities. Some have top sliced for free school meals. Some have given all the money for free school meals and are meeting the cost directly from their social funds. Some do not have social funds. So it's difficult to say we're doing exactly the same as everybody else. But certainly North Yorkshire are funding free school meals and are funding the winter sports scheme from their social funds. So going back to paragraph 2 in the recommendations, what we're actually asking is we extend the winter sports scheme through to the 16th of April with potentially an additional £5,000 above the 200,000 predicted in February. The payments we make within April are just to the 16th when the scheme finishes. So what's been happening is we've been making 4 weekly payments to date to all the families who claim. But if we were to make 4 weekly payments in April, which would take us 2 weeks beyond the cut-off date, that would again have substantial costs, because we get most families claim each month. So if each month's costing us say £75,000, it would add another potential £30,000 onto the costs if we paid them. So we're asking that we terminate the payments in line with the government scheme on the 16th of April, and that we delegate any decision to spend above the revised 205,000 to the Council's Section 151 officer in consultation with the Executive Member for Finance and Performance. I hope that explains what this paper is trying to do, but I'm happy to take any questions.
Okay, Councillor Craghill.
Thank you. I suppose just one question people might want to understand is, you know, what have we got in place to support people after the 16th of April?
I think that's a valid question, and it's something that, you know, in terms of all the support that's going to drop out across the year from, you know, furlough coming to an end, you know, evictions from housing has now been extended out to June, but there's so many things happening across this year which may cause financial pressures on our residents, and I suppose now after several months of providing these monthly payments to residents, taking that away is going to have significant impact on some families, given that we don't know whether employment will come back at the level it was prior to COVID. The only thing I can say in terms of that is that we don't really have funding to continue the scheme because it was never our scheme, and it's really up to, you know, the issues that's been raised here. It's up to government to give us more money if they want to see that continue. But the council has got the WIFAS scheme, which we put the additional funding to in 2021. We've ruled any money of that's left at the year end will come into 21-22. So if customers do face hardship, they can still come to us for support. So we're not withdrawing all the support, we just won't be providing the support through this scheme.
Yes, thank you. Yes, there is certainly the WIFAS, the financial assistance scheme, is still there. I just think, in terms of a comment, that this emphasises even more this one, the point that we made previously about the unhelpful nature of the government's stop-start support, you know, the nature of their funding being so stop-start, both for councils and for residents. It really doesn't help or make it easier, does it? Obviously, we're pleased to receive the additional funding for April, but in the face of the current situation, it's, as you say, it's going to be barely sufficient, even with an additional 200,000 from the council's own funds added into that, and the government still isn't properly funding free school meals as we go forwards through the holidays. So I think, you know, it's something that we'd really like to see. So I'm glad we're able to make this provision as far as we can, and that we do have the financial assistance fund in place, as you described, David, going forward after the 16th. And I am happy with the arrangements to delegate the decision regarding the further funds if that's required.
Yeah, I would echo most of those comments. In reference to paragraph 2C, David, I think I like your optimism to think that this will cover us off until the 16th of April and nothing new or different will happen in that interim period. I think we probably thought that in February, and we're back here again 2 weeks later. So I suspect any manner of things may happen that will cause you to have to bring this paper back again in some other form. But hopefully that will be in some way to redress the cliff edge that Councillor Craghill has alluded to on the 16th of April. And yes, as a local authority, I think we've done as much as we possibly can and have made sure that we've put extra provision within the budget to try and provide a level of support. But we simply don't have the resources that the national government have, and being able to extend a scheme like this at the same level as that is not something we would be financially able to. So I welcome the paper we've got in front of us and the support we're able to give. And I think I'm happy to agree the recommendations at paragraph 2 on page 15. That's okay with Councillor Craghill?
Yes, it is.
Okay. And then I believe I have no urgent business. So for that one, I'm happy to declare the meeting closed. Thank you, everybody, for your time.
Thank you.